From the headquarters of Talasio English in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. In Colombia, presidential candidates Gustavo Petro and Duque are set to contest the second round of the election on June 17th. In Sunday's vote, right-wing candidate Duque of the Democratic Center Party took the lead with over 39% of the vote. He was closely followed by the left-wing candidate Gustavo Petro of the Colombia Humana Party with 25% of the vote. This was the first presidential election that took place after the FARC peace accords were signed, a historic deal that ended 50 years of internal armed conflict.
After almost 3 hours, the final results showed that Duque from Centro Democrático and Gustavo Petro from Colombia Humana are through to the next round of the presidential elections. They didn't get enough votes to win in the first round. More than 19 million Colombians participated in these elections. Duque got 39.13% of the vote, finishing in the lead place of the first round.
Tell Gustavo Petro, we are ready for a confrontation and dialogue. We are ready for a proper debate and to let Colombians define the future of our country. This goes beyond social class issues.
Gustavo Petro won 25.9% of the vote.
We won't be stopped. We'll keep moving forward and we will triumph.
The candidates will have to analyze the new strategies in order to get more support for their campaigns. Next 17th of June, Colombians will choose one of these men to be their leader. While this primary phase of the election saw a record-high domestic voter turnout of over 50%, it remains to be seen how enthusiastic the Colombian electorate will be for the second round of voting.
But accusations of voter fraud continue to dog Colombia's electoral process. The Electoral Observation Mission registered at least 33 reports on the purchase and sale of votes, with 24 others on the delivery of electoral advertising material on Sunday morning. The electoral body said around 1,000 irregularities were reported in total.
A total of 627 anomalies and irregularities were reported, most of them related to purchases and sale of votes. 186 reports that point out the mobilization of voters in car, buses or taxis who were given cash and goods. This phenomenon is particularly important as one of every 3 reports we got were related to it. We also got 31 reports on usurpation of voters' identity, so we think it is necessary to implement biometric identification in all Colombian departments. The third main issue was the use of electoral ads next to polling stations, which is forbidden by the law.
The irregularities reports were confirmed by the Immediate Reception Unit for Electoral Transparency, created by the state in 2013. The body reported 1,239 irregularities by 6:30 p.m. local time. The capital city of Bogota registered 179 reports. Medellin in the northern department of Antioquia, 124. In Barranquilla in the Atlántico department, 101. 99 reports were registered at the Central Department of Cundinamarca and 91 in the city of Cali. In the Valle del Cauca Petro's party, Colombia's Humana reported pre-marked votes in favor of the candidate Duque in different Colombian departments. The party also said Colombian police acted violently against Petro supporters in the southern city of Ipiales. Colombian Senator Iván Cespedes pointed out the fact that the sum of the votes for Petro and the 2 other former candidates, Sergio Fajardo and Humberto de la Calle, could lead to a victory for Petro in the second round of the election, despite the fact that he fell short of the top spot in this round. Now, so far, none of the former candidates have said if they will be supporting either Petro or Duque. For more on Colombia, we go now to Dan Kovalik, a human rights lawyer and labor lawyer from the United States. Dan, who teaches international human rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, has participated as an international observer in elections in Venezuela, Nicaragua and El Salvador. He joins us now midway through his trip home from Colombia, where he observed yesterday's elections. Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell me, what stood out most to you in yesterday's elections, especially in comparison to the elections in Venezuela, where you were an observer, and that took place a week ago?
Well, first of all, what I witnessed and what Colombian human rights leaders, told us about is that Colombia has, frankly, a very backward electoral system in which people go to a cardboard stand in which they fill out a ballot with a pen and then throw the ballot in the box. Ballots are then counted by individuals kind of left to their own devices and tallied. And there's no way to verify whether the tallies are correct, whether people voted more than one time. In fact, El Tiempo newspaper in Colombia reported a case where a guy voted 7 times. So it is not a good system compared to Venezuela, where you have to use a fingerprint to even get the election machine to go on.
Now, Dan, there were many formal complaints of irregularities as well as a number of killings and violent incidences leading up to these elections. Can you tell us more about what you heard on your ground about the voting irregularities and also the threats to the lives of candidates?
Yeah, so there's many. First of all, 9,000 Gustavo Petro election observers weren't denied credentials. And so again, because you have this system which really is not verifiable in any way, if you don't have observers there, there's much room for fraud. In addition, a Gustavo Petro campaign coordinator was murdered the night before the election. And there's been a number of assassinations leading up to the election. We went to the area of Naya, which is a community of indigenous Afro-Colombians, and there were 3 killed right before the election. Moreover, the paramilitaries issued a written statement threatening supporters of Petro as military targets for the election. So there are so many irregularities that prevent this from being free and fair election.
Now, Dan, Colombia is going into the second round. Unfortunately, we're having some signal problems with this interview, so I'm going to have to cut it short. But we're definitely going to talk to you again about the elections in Colombia, your experiences, especially since we have to talk about the second round of the elections in Colombia. Other news now, a trucker strike paralyzing fuel, goods and food deliveries across Brazil has entered its 8th day. Truckers are angry over the rise in cost from 3.36 Brazilian reals, which is about 92 US cents a litre in January, to 3.6 reals before the strike. And on May 26, it hit 3.8. Road blockages remain in place in 25 of the country's 27 states, despite President Michel Temer's decision to cave to the drivers' key demand for lower diesel costs. Shortages of aviation fuel has paralyzed 8 airports and has essentially shut down the huge Santos seaport near Sao Paulo. Meanwhile, supermarkets and hospitals are dealing with shortages.
The proposal is insignificant for what the Brazilian people need. What do we want? We want an accessible end price to reach the customer, 50% less taxes.
He made an announcement, but these 46 cents is less than price increases just this year. This year alone, it has gone up a lot more. So those 46 cents still isn't what we understand to be a significant improvement.
We do not believe in his proposals. We do not believe anything Temer said, and the people are with us.
Proposals were made to the truckers, and I am one of those who refused these proposals, because these measures only benefited me, and I do not want that. It's all the people who must benefit.
In Argentina, a national march of social movements is expected to take place on Friday against Mauricio Macri's neoliberal policies. Our correspondent Edgardo Esteban has the details.
Greetings from Buenos Aires. A federal march by various social movements is scheduled for this Friday in front of the National Congress, denouncing the difficult situation social movements are facing thanks to the neoliberal policies of Mauricio Macri's government. They are asking for a food emergency law for those of limited resources, also a sanitary emergency law to be able to help children who can't afford it. They are also demanding credits for small farmers who are facing difficulties not only because of the crisis, but also due to the increase of fees. Social movements are also asking that if tariff increases are put in place throughout the year, that it be in accordance with salaries. There's also a lot of expectation for the upcoming march that will take place on Friday, which will demand changes to the government of Mauricio Macri and also against the IMF. Back to you.
We thank Edgardo Esteban for that report, and we take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
Opponents of the peace agreement in Colombia celebrated big victories in the March 11th congressional election. Some say this is due to widespread fraud, with the Electoral Observation Mission of Colombia reporting over 1,200 violations. Apparent vote buying was caught on camera. 20% of voting centers didn't have enough ballots. 30% say they were not allowed to vote privately. And voters across the country reported physical threats and violence against leftist candidates and supporters. The New York Times reported that when dozens of those paramilitary leaders were arrested, known for commanding widespread civilian massacres, disappearances, and forced displacements, Uribe extradited them to the U.S. so they could serve short sentences and evade accountability in Colombia. When the state-backed paramilitary network United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia, which publicly declared trade unionists legitimate targets for assassination, was implicated for widespread massacres and torture, the Uribe administration ensured little or no jail time. Uribe himself enjoys presidential immunity for his proven role in multiple war crimes.
Welcome back. In Barbados, the new members of the cabinet and their parliamentary secretaries have been sworn in. Prime Minister Mia Mottley acknowledged that her cabinet is larger than normal, but she says despite the country's economic situation, the cost of a few extra salaries won't compare to how much they'll save from having a more efficient government. Mottley herself will also be the Minister of Finance and would therefore be directly responsible for guiding Barbados out of their economic crises.
The cabinet of ministers will be relatively large because I've not only considered the mandate given to us by the people, but also the scope of the work to be done and the level of expertise that is at our disposal among elected members.
So to properly discuss the economic challenges facing Barbados, we're being joined by the economist Jeremy Stevens. Jeremy, I'm so sorry for mispronouncing your name. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell me, how serious is the situation in Barbados right now?
It depends on how you want to look at it. Economically, it's very, very serious. But the good thing is that these elections have brought on a new sense of energy that would at least, as far as I'm concerned, help Barbadians to want to do better by the way of the economy. We've had issues, especially socially, infrastructurally. There was a bit of a sewage, not a bit, but a sewage issue that we had and still is going on. Government has had issues with being able to keep up expenditure, infrastructural expenditure, wage expenditure, and it's been racking up our debt as well. So we're a very in-debt country, top 10 in the world for sure, 150% of GDP. And it's been stifling us. It's been stifling our foreign reserves. And as a small country that depends very heavily on foreign exchange, that's actually problematic. It will curb or inhibit greatly our ability to import and therefore consume items. So economically, we are at a very challenging place, but because of the result, one would hope that this means that a new energy and a new sense of confidence will open up and free up investment to help us continue to propel our economy forward. I'm looking at about 5 years or so, if this energy is consistent and true, about 5 years or so before we see some measurable form of recovery.
Now, Jeremy, you released a Facebook video over the weekend addressing the economy and the misconceptions you felt many of your fellow citizens had. You said they need to not expect prices to go down, that they need to they should concentrate on getting salary increases. And you also said that healing the economy would not take less than 7 years. Is the situation really that dire? And, you know, why you had to have the Facebook video explaining these things to people?
All right, well, let me just first tell you that I've been doing Facebook videos a lot for like 5 years, well, 2 years mainly, and been doing a lot of public engagement. And the reason why is that the former government, I found was very problematic in how they communicated information. And a lot of my citizens, a lot of my fellow men, a lot of my family who might not have been well off or understood how the economy works were being either misguided or just downright not knowing what was going on. So in that line, I decided, well, on Saturday again, I saw an issue where a lot of people thought that Motley coming in, not only would she change or probably help with confidence in the economy, but somehow because of some taxes she wanted to remove, like the dastardly NSRL, that's really been choking the economy thus far.
Jeremy, was the NSRL? Really quickly, was the NSRL?
Yeah, NSRL. Let's just stick with the acronym for now, because to explain it, National Social Responsibility Levy. It's just a badly applied tax that the former Minister of Finance placed that choked the economy more than he probably expected. But I'll say this much. People are expecting, because she said she wanted to remove it, that prices will go down. But I just wanted to, on Saturday, I think it was when they released that video, explain how in economics prices just don't come down like that. They just don't, especially if you're a small open economy that takes prices. We don't export anything. We don't control prices in any industry. So, you know, when you look at that and how private sectors tend to behave, you can't expect prices to come down. So I also caution Barbadians to treat this time as a very serious time that we should look towards long-term recovery, 7 years or so, 5 to 7 years. But more importantly, I said, well, look, stop focusing on the issue of prices coming down, because that's out of your control. That depends on Donald Trump. That depends on Venezuela. That depends on Brazil. That depends on
really
a lot
quickly,
of
Jeremy,
large countries.
So because you explained the price issues, I wanted to go back to these salary increases. I think in the Facebook video, you'll correct me, you were saying that they need to concentrate on asking for higher wages. But isn't higher wages one of the problems facing the government in Barbados? Like,
right.
like
So
explain to me how it works.
No problem. So that's not. I actually don't think that we should let the wage rate rise. And I wasn't speaking specifically to public sector workers. I was trying to tell people you shouldn't worry about cost of living. You should worry about being able to be productive and therefore get more wages. That's not something, however, I'm advocating. I'm not advocating that the Mia Motley government say, okay, like Oprah, everybody gets a wage raise. I'm not saying that, because that honestly would lead to a cost of living increase in a few years. What I was saying is that people are focusing on the wrong problem. The wrong problem is cost of living. The right problem is, how do I, as an individual, get a wage increase or go out there and get more income? So I'm also championing entrepreneurship. I'm championing investing, finding new ways to invest on a private and public sector level. That's exactly what I was trying to get across. But I was comparing apples and oranges. Well, apples and apples, if you get where I'm coming from.
No problem. And let's get back to your new Prime Minister, Mia Motley, who is now also the Finance Minister. Has she said anything yet to make you believe she's heading on the right path where your economy is concerned?
Well, this one might get me in trouble, but no, not yet. And I think she's been doing the right things thus far in terms of how she's tried to inculcate or tried to encourage confidence in the economy. yes, the size of the cabinet, the ministerial cabinet, has been a challenging one to sell to Barbadians. And whereas, as you said earlier, she said she wanted to focus on efficiency, I think that's the right message to put out there. But in terms of the particulars, that is, how do we deal with our debt? They during the election were talking about debt reprofiling, and I wanted more details there because given where we are, given how many downgrades we've had as an economy, given the stagnation that we've had for a number of years, I was thinking to myself, well, we need a little more detail now because it's going to be very hard to reprofile. So maybe they're going to come up with more information. So insofar, I think what she's been trying to do is, again, to rally confidence, to make every Barbadian feel as if they have to be involved in this recovery, as opposed to government just being the ones that are supposed to lead this recovery. And insofar, people have been talking. There's been a lot more civic engagement. And that goes outside of economics. There's a confidence, there's an interest, there's an active interest in what's going on in Barbados. So again, I think it's the right start, but again, I'm giving them 100 days to see how they manage this and if they give way more detail as to the tough decisions that they're going to have to make, like reducing expenditure, which may very well lead to job cuts. But one would hope the private sector picks up the excess labor in time. I really don't know. So again, I'm giving them 100 days before I really begin to nail them to the cross, if they need to be nailed.
Really quickly, Jeremy, but the Prime Minister released the IMF report as one of the first things she did. Isn't that a good sign?
No, that's a great sign, but it's not something that hasn't been done before. But you see, again, politics was the name of the day. And I think the former government really wanted to hold back that dire IMF report because it was truthful to our situation. They wanted to hold it back before elections just to stand a fighting chance, because the narrative that they kept on pushing out there, this is the former government, was that Barbados was on the rebound. It was almost Trumpite, if you can go that way, where you're saying things that aren't necessarily reality just to get people to buy into it. So by releasing the IMF report, I think she's done her fiduciary and ministerial duties as normal. But what was not normal was the holding back or the redaction somewhat of this new IMF report that just came out.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. We appreciate talking to you. We might have to come to you again to explain this very complicated financial situation Barbados has found itself in. We've been speaking to Jeremy Stevens. He's an economist in Barbados. Other news now, with this past weekend's FML primary elections in El Salvador, it is former Minister Hugo Martinez who is now set to represent the party in the upcoming presidential elections, which are due to take place February 2019.
Hours after the closing of the ballot boxes and with 95% of votes counted, the Special Electoral Commission of the FMLN reported the results of the internal elections.
With this vote, Comrade Hugo Martinez becomes the presidential candidate of Frente Farabundo Martí for National Liberation.
Gerson Martinez recognized the triumph of his opponent and, along with the Secretary General of the FMLN, Medardo González, expressed support for the presidential candidate.
I want to congratulate all the compañeras and compañeros who participated in this decision. We have very clearly now selected and participated in making this decision to have our comrade Hugo Martinez represent us in this electoral political struggle.
Following the announcement of his victory, Hugo Martinez celebrated the triumph with his followers and committed to work towards improving security, the economy, and the continuation of social programs.
I want to say to the country that we have heard the message. To you, my friends of the Salvadoran population, we have taken this message and we will make all adjustments necessary to be closer to the people.
The message, which Hugo Martinez has referred to, was the unfavorable results in the March 4th legislative and mayoral elections, where the FMLN lost ground.
We are reunifying as a party, but the most important reunification is with the Salvadorian people. The FMLN is obliged to return to its origins, which is to be rooted with the Salvadorian people, to listen to the people, walk with the people, and I believe that this is the future we'll have.
Hugo Martinez announced that he will begin a large-scale national mobilization to be able to reach out to the people and get to know their issues. to develop a government plan to guarantee the population a third term of the country's leftist party.
Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno has sent the National Assembly a draft bill for a new economic program. Today in a press conference, the Ministers of Finance, Foreign Trade, Industry and holders of SRI, the Internal Revenue Service, and the Central Bank detailed the draft law of productive development, which was sent to the National Assembly. It is the first time that the economic and productive sectors have met since the changes made by President Moreno.
We haven't increased taxes. We are boosting with this bill. We trust that the National Assembly approves the bill, and we are going to boost the economy. We will attract foreign currency. We will sustain dollarization, and we will generate job sources without having to incur debt, because we know that that is not the way.
Paraguayan President Horacio Cartes has presented his resignation as he plans to take a seat as a senator of the Colorado Party in the legislative period beginning July 1st. The resignation note was addressed to the Chamber of Senators, which will evaluate the decision and decide whether or not to accept it. If accepted, Vice President Alicia Pucheta will become the first woman president in the country's history. That is, until recently elected Mario Abdo Benitez of the same political party is sworn into the presidency on August 15th. The 22nd International Poetry Festival of Havana has begun at the headquarters of the Union of Writers and Artists of Cuba. More than 130 poets from 30 countries are participating, where artists will pay homage to Che Guevara and participate on a forum on the environment and the importance of citizen responsibility. The prestigious Rafael Alberti Prize was presented to the poet Virgilio Lopez Limas, granted in recognition of his life's work as an outstanding poet, pedagogue, essayist and researcher during his long and fruitful career. Student protests in Bolivia have grown over recent days. Our correspondent Freddy Morales has the details.
At least 7 universities participated in protests against the government after the death of a student from El Alto University a week ago. They demanded a bigger budget for their universities. During the weekend, President Morales warned about an opposition plan to disrupt his rule of the country. Morales compared this situation, in which he is being accused of being a murderer, to a similar one in 2002, where he was blamed for the death of 2 people in the coca production zone of El Chapare. This case was soon dismissed because of the lack of evidence. This time, Evo Morales stated that the opposition is trying to damage his reputation with lies and that this is a plan to disrupt the relatively stable situation in the country. Teachers, students and workers of at least 7 public universities organized mass protests and said that they will stay in the street for the next days, asking the government bring to justice those responsible for the death of the 20-year-old student that took place last week.
We thank Freddy Morales for that report. And we have some breaking news coming out of Venezuela, where President Nicolas Maduro is speaking live at the Federal Government Council. President Maduro is making some important decisions regarding working towards a national dialogue. Now, no specific names have been mentioned, but the president has said that he is willing to free some of the imprisoned political actors who were involved in causing violence in the past. And that breaking news report brought us right to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesyourtv.net/English. And you can join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Soini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
Venimos del sur, norte, oriente, occidente.